My brother and I haven't spoken in 30 years. Because we fell in love with the same woman. My brother and I used to be inseparable. James was 2 years older than me. Taller, sharper, louder, the kind of guy everyone noticed the second he walked into a room. I was quieter, more careful. People called me the nice one, like that was somehow a consolation prize. But we were close. We shared a room until we were 18. Got matching scars on our knees from wiping out on bikes in the summer of '76. We knew each other's tells during poker, each other's lies when we were sneaking out, and each other's secrets. Or so I thought. We both fell in love with her. But I met her first. Her name was Claire. And if I'm being honest, I don't know if I ever stood a chance when she met James. I was 21 when I met her. I was in college, working weekends at the local bookstore. She walked in wearing this oversized denim jacket and a pair of sunglasses she clearly didn't need. It was raining outside. She asked for poetry. I fumbled over my words and dropped a stack of Neruda paperbacks at her feet. She laughed. The kind of laugh that makes you forget what day it is. We started talking. She kept coming back. Coffee turned into lunch, then dinner. We didn't call it dating, not yet, but it felt like something just beginning to bloom. One weekend, I brought her home. It wasn't a big thing. My parents were hosting a barbecue. I figured, why not? Introduce her to the family. Let her see where I came from. That's when she met James. And that's when everything started to slide sideways. He was home from grad school, cocky as ever, wearing a backwards cap and holding court like always. Claire and I had barely walked into the backyard when he spotted us. Is this her? He said, grinning. The infamous Claire. I had only mentioned her a few times to him. I didn't even know he'd remembered her name. He shook her hand, looked her up and down in that way James always did. Not disrespectful, just intense. Direct. Like he was already peeling back layers. And she laughed. Same laugh she gave me on our first day. My stomach dropped. I told myself I was overreacting. But I wasn't. After that barbecue, things changed. Slowly at first. Claire still called me. Still came by. But she started asking if James would be around. Said things like, your brother's really funny, or you two are so different. I told myself I was imagining it. That I was just insecure. One night, we were sitting on my dorm floor listening to records when I leaned in to kiss her. And she pulled back. Not harshly. Not rudely. Just enough. I'm confused, she said, about what this is. We've been seeing each other for months. But suddenly, it was like I'd made it all up in my head. 2 weeks later, James came to visit me at school. We went out drinking. Got a little too drunk. And somewhere between the third and fourth beer, he looked at me, serious for once, and said, I need to tell you something. My stomach flipped. I didn't plan it, he said. It just happened. I stared at him. What happened? He couldn't even say it. He just looked down at the bar and said, Claire. And just like that, it was done. Whatever brotherhood we had, whatever bond we'd spent a lifetime building, cracked straight down the middle. I walked out of the bar and didn't speak to him for years. Didn't go to his graduation. Didn't answer his calls. Didn't even show up to Mom's 60th birthday. I couldn't look at him without seeing the moment he stole something from me that I didn't even fully have yet. But here's the part one never told anyone. It wasn't just about her. It was about him always winning. Always getting what he wanted. Always being the one who lit up the room while I waited in the shadows. Quietly holding onto whatever scraps were left. And Claire? She wasn't a scrap. She was the first thing I'd ever really wanted for myself. And he took her. I didn't talk to Claire after that night. She tried. Called a few times. Left voicemails. Said things like, please don't hate me. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because the thing is, I wasn't just heartbroken. I was humiliated. It wasn't like we had some epic love story, Claire and I. We weren't soulmates. Not really. But we were something. Or at least I thought we were. I thought I was building something real. Something mine. And now, all I could think about was her kissing my brother while I sat in my room, waiting for her to call. I didn't see either of them for months. I avoided family gatherings. Skipped birthdays. Lied about work. I was angry, sure. But more than that, I was afraid. Afraid of what I'd feel if I saw them together. Afraid I'd say something I couldn't take back. Eventually, Mom called me. Said, James is bringing Claire to Thanksgiving. Just hearing her name made my chest tighten. I said I couldn't make it. She sighed but didn't argue. And that became the routine. They'd be there. So I wouldn't. The first time I saw them again was at our cousin's wedding the following summer. I hadn't wanted to go, but I couldn't get out of it. It was family. I told myself I'd stay for the ceremony and slip out before the reception. But they walked in during the vows. Sat 3 rows behind me. And I could feel them. Their presence, their closeness, the way she laughed at something James whispered. I turned around once. Just for a second, Claire looked beautiful. Her hand was resting lightly on his leg. She looked at me, like really looked, and there was this flicker in her eyes. Not guilt, not pity, just sadness. And I hated her for it, because you don't get to look sad when you chose him. Later that night, I was heading to my car when I heard someone call my name. I turned around. It was Claire. She was standing there in the parking lot, arms wrapped around herself, like she wasn't sure what gave her the right to even speak to me. "Can we talk?" she asked. I didn't answer. She stepped closer. "I never meant to hurt you." I laughed. Cold. Sharp. "You didn't." I just finally saw things clearly. Her face fell a little. "It wasn't like that. You're a good man. But not him, right?" She didn't say anything. Didn't have to. She walked away after that. Didn't run. Didn't cry. Just turned around and walked back into the party where my brother was probably telling a story, holding a drink, smiling like he always did. And I stood there in the dark, fists clenched, teeth grinding, wishing I'd never brought her to that goddamn barbecue. Months passed. Then years. James and Claire moved in together. Got engaged. Then married. I didn't go to the wedding. I barely spoke to my parents that year. Stopped returning calls. Sent birthday cards late, if at all. I told myself it was better that way. Cleaner. Easier. Because every time I thought about them, this bitterness crawled up my throat. Not just because he'd taken her, but because he didn't even seem sorry. Like it was just one more thing he deserved. And here's the thing. He tried. James called. Texted. Even showed up once to the bar I worked at. He said things like, "It wasn't planned, man. I didn't mean for it to go that way. I miss you." But all I heard was, "I win again." So I stopped picking up. Eventually, he stopped trying. And our family, well, they got used to it. 2 brothers. 1 woman. 1 decade-long silence. And nobody willing to crack it open. By the time a full decade had passed, the silence between James and me wasn't just a wound. It was part of the family architecture. People worked around it, like furniture you didn't want to move. At birthdays, we were rotated like awkward chess pieces. At Christmas, 2 separate dinners. When Dad turned 70, we didn't even pretend. They had a party on Saturday. I brought over cake on Sunday. No one talked about it anymore. It just was. Claire and James had 2 kids by then. I'd see photos of them on Facebook. Claire pushing a stroller, James holding a toddler on his shoulders, both of them grinning like a Hallmark ad. And I'd scroll right past, pretending it didn't bother me. But it did. Not because I wanted Claire back. Not even because I still hated James. But because they looked like a life I could have had. If things had gone just a little differently. If she had chosen me. Then Mom had her stroke. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. I was at work, scrubbing down tables when my phone rang. Dad's voice cracked on the other end. "She's in the hospital. It's bad." I got there before James did. She was unconscious. Tubes. Machines. Beeping. Dad was pale. Just sitting there holding her hand like if he squeezed hard enough, she'd come back. And then James walked in. We hadn't been in the same room in almost 15 years. He looked older. Grayer. But still him. Same walk. Same presence. Same damn timing. He saw me. Paused. Nodded once. I didn't nod back. We spent hours sitting in that hospital waiting room, across from each other, saying nothing. Claire showed up later. She brought food. Hugged Dad. Hugged me. I let her. And for the first time in forever, she looked me in the eye and said, "You okay?" I nodded. Lie. The doctor came in that night with the kind of face you don't forget. Said Mom wasn't going to wake up. Said we had decisions to make. Dad broke down. I hadn't seen him cry since Grandma's funeral. James stepped up, put his hand on his shoulder. And I just sat there, watching, feeling like a guest in my own damn family. That night, after Dad went home to rest, it was just me and James by Mom's bedside. The machines hummed. The silence pressed in. He finally spoke first. "She wants us to talk." I shook my head. "Don't. It's been long enough." "Don't," I said again. "Not now." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "You think I haven't carried this for 30 years? You think I didn't lose something too?" I laughed under my breath. "Yeah, you lost your brother." He looked at me then. Really looked. "You think she didn't break my heart too?" That stopped me. Because I didn't expect that. Not from him. Not the golden boy. Not the guy who always got what he wanted. "I loved her," he said. "Still do. But I never meant to steal her. She made the choice. We both just lived with it." I didn't respond. Couldn't. Because deep down I knew it was true. Claire hadn't been taken from me. She left. James stood up to leave, then paused at the door. "You don't have to forgive me. But don't let it end like this. Not with her lying in that bed." And then he was gone. And I was alone again. With Mom. With the machines. With the silence I'd been feeding for half my life. Mom passed 2 days later. Peacefully, they said. in her sleep. Like that makes it any easier. The funeral was small. Just family, a few close friends. She was always a simple woman, didn't want anything extravagant. Just soft music, sunflowers, and for us to all get along. That last part, of course, didn't happen. I stood near the back during the service. James was front row. Claire to side. Their two kids dressed in black, fidgeting with the unfamiliar weight of grief. I couldn't help but think how strange it was that my mother's grandchildren barely knew me. They called me Uncle Mark once at a birthday party. That was it. Strangers, technically, by choice, by mine. After the service, people gathered in the church hall for sandwiches and awkward small talk. I avoided the crowd, sat outside on the stone steps, watching the sky shift, thinking about all the things I never said to her, wondering if she ever hated me for how far apart James and I had drifted. Claire came out and sat next to me. She didn't say anything for a while, just sat, like old times. Eventually, she pulled something from her bag, a letter. Old-looking. The envelope was yellowed and soft around the edges. She wrote this before she went into the hospital, Claire said. Gave it to me. Said to give it to both of you after, you know. I took it, hands shaking. We sat there while I read it aloud. Asterisk to my boys. I don't want to lecture you. I'm too old, and you're too stubborn for that. But I want you to hear this. I watched you two grow from wild little boys who couldn't be separated to grown men who've spent 30 years pretending the other doesn't exist. And it breaks my heart every single day. I know what happened. I always knew, and I never took sides. You both hurt. You both lost. And I'm not going to pretend one pain was bigger than the other. But here's what I do know. Love doesn't take, it gives. And whatever happened with Claire, it's not worth the life you've both missed. Mark, I know you felt second best for so long, but you've always been my heart. James, I know you didn't mean to break anything, but sometimes silence hurts more than betrayal. Talk to each other. Forgive each other. Not because you have to, but because time runs out. And I don't want to see either of you alone when that happens. I love you both. Mom. Asterisk. I couldn't breathe after reading it. I folded the letter twice, then once more, and just stared at my hands. James came out a few minutes later. Sat on the other side of me. We didn't speak, but we were sitting side by side for the first time in 3 decades. And that felt like something. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept playing her words over and over again in my head. Time runs out. All those years I wasted hating him. Hating her. Hating myself. And for what? What did I even get out of it? A lonely apartment? 2 kids I didn't know? A heart so full of bitterness it barely had room for anything else? She was right. Silence had become my punishment. And no one handed it to me. I chose it. I picked up the phone the next morning. Called James. He picked up after the first ring. Yeah. You free for lunch? Pause. Yeah, I am. We met at a diner we used to go to as kids. Same cracked red booths. Same faded jukebox in the corner. Same grumpy waitress who somehow still remembered our orders. Or maybe she just pretended to. James looked nervous. Not fidgety, just tense. Like he'd been waiting for this conversation his entire life, but didn't know where to begin. Neither did I. We made small talk at first. Football. Work. The usual guy stuff we hide behind when the real things are too sharp to hold. Finally, I set my coffee down and said, "Why didn't you tell me?" He didn't pretend not to know what I meant. "I wanted to," he said. "That night. After the bar. But you waited until it was too late." "I know. You were supposed to be my brother, James. My best friend. My family. I still am." I scoffed. "No. You're a stranger who married the girl I loved." That's when he dropped his fork. Just let it clatter onto the plate and leaned forward. "You want to know the truth? I didn't just fall in love with her. I envied you. For once, you had the light. You had something before I did. And I was jealous. Not of her, of you. Of how you looked when you talked about her. Of how real it felt. That threw me. Because James never admitted weakness. Not once growing up. Not ever. But now there it was. On the table between us. Raw and ugly. "So what?" I said. "You took her to prove a point?" He shook his head. "No. I fell in love with her too. But I hated that it felt like stealing." I sat back. It was stealing. Then I've been a thief for 30 years. And trust me, I've paid for it every single day. We didn't finish our food. We sat there in silence for a long time. Then, as we were getting up to leave, he said something I'll never forget. "She wants to talk to you." I froze. "Claire." He nodded. "She's been wanting to for years." I never knew if I should ask. I didn't answer. Just nodded once. We met 2 days later. Her house was warm. Books stacked in every corner. Kid toys scattered across the floor. A half-burned candle on the windowsill. Claire looked older. Not worse, just older. Softer. Like life had wrapped her in stories and let her age with grace. She hugged me when I walked in. I let her. We sat on the couch, 2 cups of tea between us, neither of us touching them. I thought about writing to you, she said. So many times. But I didn't think you wanted to hear from me. I didn't, I said. For a long time. She nodded. I know. And then she looked at me. Really looked. You were good to me, Mark. Kind. Sweet. And I cared about you. But I was 22, and I didn't know what love was supposed to feel like yet. Not really. So you chose him. No, she said quietly. I let you go. I looked away. Because even after all these years, it still stung. Why didn't you just tell me? I asked. Instead of pulling back, disappearing, letting it all blow up like that. She sighed. Because I didn't know how. Because I didn't want to hurt you. Because I was scared I was making the wrong choice. Pick a reason. They all feel like excuses now. Then she added. But I did love him. And I still do. That was the hardest part to swallow. Because deep down, some selfish piece of me still hoped she regretted it. Still thought, maybe if time had played out differently. But she didn't. And that was okay. Heartbreaking. But okay. Before I left, she touched my hand. You're a good man, Mark. I'm sorry it had to happen the way it did. But I'm not sorry I knew you. I nodded. Didn't trust myself to say anything. Because that was the closest I'd ever get to closure. And honestly, it was enough. I thought seeing Claire again would break me. Instead, it settled something. Not like flipping a switch. More like easing into warm water after decades of holding your breath. She didn't regret choosing James. She didn't hate me either. And most of all, she didn't owe me anything anymore. We were just 2 people who once touched the same moment and walked away in different directions. It wasn't betrayal anymore. It was life. I told my dad I saw James. He just looked at me, eyes tired, voice soft. Took you boys long enough. Then he walked out to the garden and didn't say another word. That's how he was, never dramatic but always watching. I think he knew all along how bad it got between us. And I think it broke him too, quietly. The way fathers carry their children's failures like bruises on their own skin. That week, I also called my niece and nephew. First time in years. We met for ice cream. Sat at a park table while they told me about school and video games and their dog, Millie. They didn't ask why I'd been gone so long. Kids are good like that. Forgiving in a way adults forget how to be. I just listened, smiled, took it in. And when my nephew, out of nowhere, said, "Hey, Uncle Mark, you're funny," I had to blink back something that felt suspiciously like tears. Later that night, I found myself walking through my apartment. This space I'd lived in alone for so long, and realizing how many years I'd wasted in silence. I looked around and saw everything I'd missed out on. Birthdays, first steps, Sunday dinners, inside jokes, messy, loud family. All traded for bitterness. And what did it get me? A clean conscience? No. A quiet life? Maybe. But not a full one. I sat down with James a few days later. Just the 2 of us. No pressure. No big talk. We watched the game. He offered me a beer. I told him he still picked the worst teams. It felt almost normal. Then, during halftime, I looked at him and said, "I hated you." He didn't flinch. Just nodded. I hated me too. Silence. Then he added, "But I missed you more." We didn't hug, didn't cry, just clink beer bottles and let the commercial play too loud in the background. It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation. It was something smaller, but maybe more real. An opening. That night, I found the old box of photos Mom had given me before she died. Tucked inside was a picture from when James and I were 10 and 12, arms slung around each other, faces sunburnt and stupid, grinning like we didn't know the world could break people apart. I stared at it for a long time, and then I made a decision. I started writing again. Not a memoir or anything like that, just letters. To James. To Claire. To Mom. Even to myself. I needed to tell the truth. All of it. Not for them. For me. Because grief had shaped me. Silence had carved me hollow. And now, maybe I was ready to build something back. Even if it took the rest of my life. I'm 64 now. I move slower. I take longer walks. I forget where I put things more often than I'd like to admit. My knees ache in the morning, and I grunt every time I stand up from the couch. It's a running joke in the family now. Uncle Mark and his soundtrack of groans. But for the first time in my life, I don't feel heavy. Not the kind of heavy that guilt brings. Or silence. Or bitterness. Just age. Just time. Just life. And that's a weight I can carry. James and I aren't best friends. We'll never be the way we were when we were kids. Too much history. Too many cracks in the foundation. But we're something. We meet for breakfast on Sundays. We text now. Dumb things. Sports updates. Inside jokes. We argue about music the same way we used to argue about whose turn it was to do the dishes. And last week, for the first time in 30 years, he said, "You should come over for dinner. Claire's making lasagna." I said yes. It was strange walking into their home again. I'd been inside once before, back when they first moved in. Before the wedding. Before the real silence. But now it was lived in. Photos on the walls. Dents in the furniture. Kids' artwork stuck to the fridge with magnets shaped like animals. Claire opened the door. We looked at each other, and for a second, I could see the past, flickering behind her eyes like a candle almost burned out. But it didn't hurt anymore. She smiled and said, "You better be hungry." And I said, "Always." The kids were loud. The table was crowded. Someone spilled water. James burned the garlic bread. And I don't think I've ever felt more human. Not perfect, not healed, just present. After dinner, Claire handed me a photo, one I hadn't seen before. It was me and James at Mom's funeral, standing a few feet apart, both looking at her casket. "I keep this in a drawer," she said. "Not because it's happy, but because it's honest." She looked at me, then added, "You both made it back. That's what matters." And maybe she's right. We did make it back. Not all the way. Not to the beginning. But to something close enough that we could sit in the same room, eat at the same table, and not be swallowed by everything we'd left unsaid. Mom was right in her letter. Time does run out. And I spent far too long thinking forgiveness had to come with a speech, or some big emotional scene, or a tearful apology under the rain. But sometimes it comes in small moments. Burnt garlic bread. A hand on your shoulder. A niece calling you Uncle Mark without hesitation. I still write. Letters mostly. To Mom. To my younger self. Sometimes I write to Claire, but I never send them. Last week, I wrote one to James. Just 3 lines. "I'm proud of you. I forgive us. Let's not waste what's left." He hasn't said anything about it. But he sent me a photo the next morning. It was our old bike, the one we wrecked in '76, rusted and bent, sitting behind Dad's shed. He captioned it, "Still standing. Kind of like us." Here's the truth. I lost Claire. I lost 30 years with my brother. I lost a lot of time I'll never get back. But I didn't lose everything. I still have mornings. I still have words. I still have a seat at the table. And for now, that's enough.